All right, welcome everybody. Happy Saturday. And it's beautiful outside too. So, and here we are doing training, doing a workshop. So, we've got 3 different groups with us today. I've got a group of people, a very large group of people that are in person. Yay for being brave. We've got everybody that's joining us on Facebook Live, and we have a group on Zoom. So if y'all notice me looking all around, it's not my Tourette's or anything. It's that, I'm trying to pay attention to all of these different groups. So those of you that this might be your first teacher workshop since the pandemic, and we've been doing the hybrid, virtual, and in person, I'll kind of tell you how this is going to work today. People that are on Zoom, if you could make sure that your cameras are turned off, as much as I would love to see your face, I don't need to. So make sure your cameras are turned off and your microphones are muted. If you need to ask a question or make a comment, you can type that into your chat screen. And by the way, my screen is shared in the training room, so anything you type, people in here can see it. So be nice. Those of you that are on Facebook, if you've got any participation, so questions or comments, you can just type that on the Facebook screen. I am getting old, and it's really hard for me to see the tiny print on Facebook, so if you see me kind of leaning in, I'm trying to read the comments because they're really small down there. If anyone's really techie and they know how to make that bigger, that would be so helpful. All right. Again, since we are doing a virtual event right here, we're going to go straight through this morning. So we will not be taking any breaks so that we will cover all of our material in the time allotted. So at any point during today's workshop, if you need to rush and flush, you go take care of yourself. All right? And I've already told the people that are here in person where the restrooms are. Those of you that are at home, you know where your restroom is. I don't need to tell you. All right? We should do our workshop until about 11:30, 11:45, depending on how we do with material. And then I'll give you time at the end to complete your worksheet. Now, those of you that are in person, your worksheet that you'll complete is in your folder, so you've got that. Those of you that are on virtual, so Facebook Live and Zoom, I will post a link at the end of the workshop today for you to complete your online worksheet to receive your certificate of completion. Most of you have been with me throughout the pandemic, so you're used to this format, you know what to do. All right. So I think that's all with housekeeping. So welcome, and today we got a very, very important topic to discuss, but it's supporting children with signs and symptoms pointing to a special need. And I say supporting children with signs and symptoms pointing to a special need because in our early education world, most of the children that we work with have not been diagnosed yet. All right? But even though they have not technically been diagnosed yet, there are some legal protection that they still have, and we're going to talk about that this morning as well. Autism, we'll talk about autism today. And the average child is not diagnosed with autism until the average age of 4. But how many of y'all have had a child in your toddler, 2-year-old, 3-year-old classroom that the signs were there? Right? But there's no modification, there's no individual education plan because the child hasn't been diagnosed yet. All right? So it's very, very common in our world that that's what we see. All right? I did this workshop about 3 years ago, I think it was, and some of you may have attended back when we got to do the big hotel ballrooms and we used to have a lot of fun and sing and dance and touch each other and everything appropriately. So, but I've changed a couple of things up in the material today. So for example, we're going to talk today about children that have sensory processing issues because that is a very, very big issue that we're starting to see in our early education program, more and more children that have sensory processing issues. So I've added that to today's session, and then, as well as a little bit of some other stuff too. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the kind of my agenda for today is we're going to talk about understanding the Americans with Disability Act. And I feel that's very, very important for everyone to understand that we do have legal guidelines that we have to follow when supporting children with signs and symptoms of a special need. All right? We can't just do whatever we want with them. They do have legal protection. Now, I'm going to go through this pretty quick, all right? Because y'all are here today because you're actually working with the children and you need some tools and some tips on how to better support these kids. All right, so if this entire group was directors and administrators, we would spend a lot of time on understanding ADA compliance. For y'all, I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version, all right? And then I'm going to go into and talk a little bit about suspension and expulsion of children in early education programs. In 2016, we had federal guidelines that were put in place on basically who you can and who you cannot kick out of your licensed child care facility, all right? And again, a lot of people don't realize that there are guidelines on this, all right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that because the first two, understanding ADA compliance and then suspension and expulsion of children, they go hand in hand because a large percentage of the children that we tend to expel have a disability. All right, so you've got to be very, very careful on how you handle that. And again, I'm gonna go pretty quick through that material unless y'all have questions. But if it was a group of directors, I'd probably spend a lot more time on it. But I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version of that. Then we'll get into what y'all came for, and that is understanding what a special need is, who has special needs, the difference between a special need and a disability. All right, because there is a big difference between the two. And then supporting children with special needs, supporting children with sensory processing issues. And then I have at the bottom that we're going to go over modifications. We're going to talk about modifications all morning long. All right, so there you go. Because I do have a blended group today. I've got people virtual and I've got people in person. Anyone that is in the room with me today, if y'all have a question or a comment, please share. I'll probably repeat it, all right, so that the people that are virtual can hear your question and be on the same page as us. So if you hear me repeating stuff, it's because I want to make sure everyone's got it. Is the room temperature in here okay? Yeah. Is it okay? Nicole, you're in charge of thermostat. It's right there next to you. So if y'all start getting hot, y'all turn it down. I'm hot right now, but I've got all this stuff pointing at me. So, all right, y'all ready? Yes. Y'all all right, let's do this. All right. So, like I said, first off, we're going to start by talking about understanding, well, that's it. I'm just going to cover up my chat. Okay. Understanding ADA compliance in private early care, early education and after-school programs. And when I say private early education and after-school programs, that would include people that are for-profit or non-profit. So if you are a non-profit organization, a non-profit faith-based organization, under federal guidelines, you're still considered private business. All right, you're still considered private business. Sometimes people think, well, we're a nonprofit. We don't have to follow ADA. That's not accurate, all right? Basically, are you a public school or not? And if not, then you fall into private business, okay? So there you go. So what is the Americans with Disability Act? All right, it's actually called the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. It was a piece of legislation that was signed by President Bush Sr., the first Bush. A lot of people will say that the Americans with Disability Act was one of the greatest human rights piece of legislation in many, many years. And I would have to agree with that. All right, it was a big milestone for our country. Like I said earlier, under the Americans with Disability Act, early education and after-school programs are considered private business, all right? I want to tell you all about the difference between the Americans with Disability Act, the 504 Rehabilitation Act, and IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And by the way, this is one of your worksheet questions. I'm going to try to tell you when we come across a worksheet question, okay? So if you're taking notes right now, this would be helpful. But one of the questions is, what is the difference between ADA and IDEA? So basically it's this. The Americans with Disability Act applies to private businesses. 504 Rehabilitation Act and IDEA applies to public schools, all right? Public schools and public schools only. And basically under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, public schools are required to make modifications for children with disabilities so that they can learn, all right? So the ability to learn can't be altered by their disability or can't be halted by their disability, all right? For those of us that are in private business, all right, we have to make accommodations for individuals with disabilities unless it creates an undue hardship, unless there is a direct threat, or there is a fundamental change in policies or processes. And I'm going to talk about each of those three items here in a minute. All right, so if you have a child in your program that the modifications that are required for that child creates an undue hardship, is a direct threat, or has a fundamental change in your policy or processes, you can exclude that child. All right? Where under 504 and IDEA, they can't. The reason why I point this up is that it's very common in our early education and after-school programs for parents to come in and say, well, I read on the internet last night that you have to accommodate my child. You can't kick us out, you have to accommodate my child. Well, no, that's not true, all right? What that parent read on the internet last night was 504 and IDEA, which apply to public schools, all right? We're not a public school, we're private business, so we fall under ADA. So that's important for y'all to know right there. All right, so like it says at the bottom, 504 and IDEA are publicly funded schools. Private childcare is neither of these. I made myself a promise that I was not going to talk about COVID or pandemic today. Don't y'all want 3 hours without COVID and pandemic talk? But I'm gonna have to say something. So it's going to be really interesting moving forward when we get into a post-pandemic situation if this is going to change. Because what I foresee happening in our world is that there are going to be more children either being homeschooled or going to private schools and less children attending public. All right, we're already starting to see a huge number of homeschooling and private schooling situations. For many years in the state of Texas, our legislators have debated on a voucher program where if a parent chooses to put their child in private school, they get to use basically a voucher for their public funding, and their public funding will pay for that private school. Now, this has not been passed. This has just been discussion. It would not surprise me in our next legislative session that starts in January if vouchers come up. And if parents do have the choice to either go to private school or homeschooling and receive that state funding, how is that going to impact ADA, 504, and IDEA? All right, because they're publicly funded dollars. So just a little, stay tuned, all right? But it wouldn't surprise me if we see these type of things change. You know, the other thing that we've talked about a lot during the pandemic is how many laws have been broken during this pandemic. And there's been so many violations of different regulations. Right here, the Americans with Disability Act and IDEA is one or two, federal programs that it would not surprise me that once we get done with the pandemic, we see thousands and thousands of lawsuits that are filed against the federal government because of violations of IDEA and ADA. Especially at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot. All right? So I say that again because if we do see that, it could create a lot of change in some of these policies. All right? Interesting stuff right there. So basically, kind of going back to what I said a minute ago, under the Americans with Disability Act, private businesses, meaning your licensed child care facility, after-school program, must make reasonable accommodations for individuals with a disability unless it creates an undue hardship. Basically, what that means is that your program must make modifications for this child if you can afford to do so. All right? If you can't afford to make those modifications, then you can exclude that child, but you're going to have to prove it. All right? So I'll give you an example that we commonly see in our licensed programs. This child requires a lower child-staff ratio. They require an additional adult in the classroom. All right? So you may or may not be able to afford that additional adult in the classroom. That could create an undue hardship. All right? The child needing a ramp to be able to get into your program. That could create an undue hardship. It's typically the group size and the ratio that we see the most in our programs. All right? A lot of times when I talk about the Americans with Disability Act, people say, oh, I don't need to pay attention to this. We don't really have any kids with disabilities in our program. We don't have any employees with disabilities. Well, the current data states that 1 in 5 Americans are affected by the Americans with Disability Act. So just the people that we have in person right now in here, there are most likely 4 people in this room that are protected under ADA, all right, based on these statistics. So you just never know, all right? You just never know. And the same thing for the children. Now, the tough part with the kids, like I mentioned earlier, is that most of the children that we serve have not been diagnosed yet, all right? But they still have protection if the disability is apparent. All right, if the disability is apparent, they could have protection. What is a disability? A disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So that's the definition of a disability. It can be short-term or long-term. All right, so it can be a temporary disability or it can be a permanent disability. All right, and again, physical or mental. All right, there you go. Here's something that's very, very important that I want all of you to understand. All right, you cannot ask a parent how severe is your child's disability. Okay, first off, you cannot just come out and ask a parent, does your child have a disability? But you also can't ask, how severe is it? That is a violation. Now, this is where it gets really tricky because, directors and administrators that are with us today, what is one question that is required by child care licensing that we must have on our enrollment forms? Does your child have a special need? That is required by licensing. So that question by child care licensing kind of puts us in jeopardy because if it's not asked correctly, we could have an ADA violation. We're going to talk about the difference between a disability and a special need, all right? And there is a big difference between the two, all right? But, it's up to the parent to notify us of the disability. Once you do learn that you have a child in your classroom that has a disability and it has been diagnosed, one of the very first things y'all need to ask for is the Individual Education Plan, or the IEP, all right? And if that child is receiving services, okay, so they're doing speech therapy, they're doing occupational therapy, whatever it may be, they have an IEP, all right? Sometimes the parents will come back and say, oh, we don't have one of those. Yeah, you do. All right? They just don't want to give it to us because they don't want us to see what's on it. You know? An IEP is considered a medical record. So you've got to be very careful with it. It needs to remain very confidential. You don't talk about it on Saturday at the soccer game. You don't talk about it with your coworkers. All right, it stays very, very confidential once you do get that. But you know, I had a situation at one of our facilities a few years ago where we had a child, we had originally enrolled this child as a toddler. And right off the bat, there were a lot of signs pointing to a disability. The older the child got, the more difficult the situation was. You know, to the point where, you know, very educated and experienced teachers were ready to walk out, you know, over this kid. Y'all have all been there. I see all of you shaking your head. You've had him too, right? You know, we finally talked mom into getting him tested, and sure enough, he did have a disability. So as soon as he, you know, was diagnosed, he started receiving services from the public school. And it was one of those situations where the bus would come and pick him up from our program, take him to public school, bring him back, you know, and he would be with us for the rest of the day. And he was 3 by this point, so he was in a 3-year-old classroom. Well, even receiving services at the public school, it just wasn't getting any better. It was getting worse. So it got to the point where, you know, I go out to the facility and I say, well, I want to see the IEP. Well, we didn't have one. So I said, well, we need to contact mom, and mom needs to get us the IEP. Well, of course, mom's first response was, well, we don't have one of those. Yeah, you do. You know, oh, well, the school won't give me a copy. Yes, they will. They're required by law to give you a copy, you know. Got to the point where I had to say, look, you've got until Friday to either bring us the most current IEP or we're going to suspend care. All right? Friday's your deadline. She finally brought it in. It was about 17 pages long. It was one of the most detailed IEPs I think I've ever read. But right there in black and white, right off the bat, it says that this child must have one-on-one care. And not only must this child have one-on-one care, it also said the child must be assigned a health assistant. So basically, one adult that will help this child with their personal needs. So eating and going to the bathroom and hand washing. So this kid required a 2 adult to 1 child ratio. Now, could we make that modification? Could we afford to do that? No, and definitely we weren't equipped for that. We weren't trained for that. This kid had some big time issues. So we unfortunately had to tell the mom that, you know, we weren't able to continue care based on the recommended modifications on the IEP. It was very sad. Now, here's the sadder part, all right? Under 504 and IDEA, technically that public school should have provided those individuals to us. All right? They should have made those modifications and sent those individuals to our facility to be with those kids. But the reality is that the public schools are just like us. They're short-staffed, they're underfunded, and they just didn't have the resources either. And that's the reality. So unfortunately, we had to wish this family well and send them on their way. It's not something we wanted to do, but it was either that or lose a whole bunch of kids and lose a whole bunch of teachers. Okay, so that's how important the IEP is. And you'll be surprised at some of the information that you see in there. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the direct threat. So again, you cannot exclude a child from your program unless their presence poses a direct threat to the health and safety of others, or it creates a fundamental alteration of your program. And I want y'all to write down these words because these are very important words. An undue hardship, a direct threat, or a fundamental alteration. Because when you're doing an individualized assessment, which are basically your notes, so you're doing your anecdotal records, your notes in the classroom, you want to make sure that you're using these words. This is what the Americans with Disability Act is going to be looking for. And if you ever were pulled into an ADA hearing, all right, where a parent filed a complaint against you, these are going to be really important words to protect yourself. All right. If y'all, those of you in the back, if y'all want to move up here to this table, y'all are more than welcome to. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Direct threat, fundamental alteration of your program, or undue hardship. So I've already explained an undue hardship is, can you financially afford to make these changes? All right. A direct threat would be that the child's disability creates a direct threat to either the child, the other children, or the adults working with them. All right? So that particular child, the other children, or the adults working to them, that might be a direct threat. And y'all have all seen and been, worked with children that their behavior that was due to a disability created a direct threat. I'll give you the biggest example for me, runners. And how many of y'all have had kids that have been the runners? All right? That child that darts out of your classroom the moment the world doesn't go their way, all right, that is a direct threat, all right, to their safety, to your safety, and the other children, okay? A fundamental alteration to the program. So does the presence of that child create a fundamental change in your policy and processes? Last year I was coaching a school down in the Houston area, and they had a situation where breathing treatments. How many of y'all, your center gives breathing treatments, right? Very, very common. And those breathing treatments are considered a reasonable accommodation to a special need. So under ADA law, we are required to accommodate those kids. However, this particular child down in the Houston area required a breathing treatment every hour on the hour, and it took at least 20 minutes to give his breathing treatment. And he was having to get one every hour. Now, did that create a fundamental alteration to the program? Yes. All right. So, we were able to exclude that child in that case. And the fact that he needed a breathing treatment every hour on the hour, I think it would be very easy to argue that that child had a condition that group care wasn't the best thing for him. He needed to be at home with a nanny or something. All right, yes. So that's what you've got to look at right there. You've got to make sure that your center is available to children with disabilities, and accommodations are available when needed. We'll talk more about that. And then if you do have a child that you may need to suspend or expel due to their disability, you're going to have to do what's called an individualized assessment. All right. Now, there is no document out there on the internet. Well, there are, but there's no official document called an individualized assessment. These are basically your notes, all right? They're basically your notes, but I want you to title your notes Individual Assessment on Kevin Miller, all right? And then you're going to do your notes right there. If you go to Google and you Google individualized assessment, you're going to pull up thousands of forms that were homemade or made by particular schools or whatnot. But as far as ADA is concerned, there's no actual form called this. It's basically your notes. The other thing is that you cannot charge a higher fee for a child with a disability. And y'all, I see y'all doing this all the time. Okay, that is a huge violation under the ADA law. Well, your child is a little bit more difficult, so we're going to charge you higher tuition. Okay, that teacher needs hazard pay. Just kidding, we don't pay that. All right, but you can't do that too. Or, that child requires an additional adult, or that child requires a lower child staff ratio, so we're going to charge a higher fee to the parent. You can't do that. That's a big time no-no. All right? Now, enrollment is still based on a first-come, first-served basis, so children with disabilities do not automatically go to the front of the waiting list. Sometimes you might have a parent that comes in and says, well, my child has a disability. You have to put them at the top of the waiting list. No, you don't, all right? It's still on a first-come, first-served basis. And if you don't have openings in that classroom, then you just don't have openings in that classroom. But y'all got to be honest about it, okay? I coached a school in Fort Worth. This has been 7 or 8 years ago now, but a school out in Fort Worth that mom called on the phone and said, hey, I'm looking for care for a 3-year-old. And the director was like, oh yeah, you know, our tuition is blah, blah, blah a week. You know, when would you like to come in for a tour? So she goes, oh, I'll come this afternoon. So when mom came in that afternoon and walked in, it was very evident that the child had a disability. So then the director goes, oh, we're full in that classroom. All right, not good. All right, that family was very upset. They filed a claim against the facility. They had to go to a hearing. They had to pay a lot of money in fines and penalties because the director basically lied. All right, unless she was able to prove from the time she took that phone call to the time that they came in for the tour, she filled all those open spots. She lied. All right, so don't do that. Don't do that. All right. If you have a child with a disability and they are receiving outside services, so you have a therapist that comes in and they're doing speech therapy or occupational therapy or whatever it is, you have to allow this, all right? As long as that therapist or that person that's coming in does not conflict with any regulatory agencies, then you have to allow these people to do their therapy. This was one of the things that we saw at the very beginning of the pandemic, and it was addressed very, very quickly. But you know, when we first got put under our shelter in place, you know, there was a brief moment where it came out, well, you know, the only people that can come into our programs are currently employed staff and currently enrolled children. You know, parents are dropping off at the front door, picking up at the front door. No one else can be in your program unless it's a regulatory, you know, licensing inspector or whatnot. Well, the Americans with Disability Act immediately was like, whoa, 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 back it up. You know, even during this pandemic and under these emergency orders, children with disabilities still have a right to receive their services. So it had to be addressed that these therapists are still allowed to come into your facility, okay, under ADA law, okay. Now, most of our therapists weren't coming, you know, based on their own decisions. So I don't know how many of y'all still had them coming in over the last 7 months, but it kind of took care of itself in our world. I went ahead and threw this in there because we've been getting this phone call a whole lot over the last couple of years. So I threw this in here. Service animals are protected under ADA law. All right. And Texas Workforce Commission, they publish a quarterly magazine. One of the best parts of that quarterly magazine is they have a frequently asked questions section. And it was about this time last year, Texas Workforce Commission published a whole article in that part of the magazine on service animals, all right? They are protected under ADA law. Now, and knock on wood, in my 32 years of working in this industry, I've never had a child with a service animal. I'm sure it's coming, all right? But what we typically see are parents that have service animals, all right? And you would need to allow them into your program. Probably not in the classroom because then we got to look at allergies and distractions by the children, those type of things. But up and down your hallways, you know, once we get to that point where people can come in the building again, all right? And they have to be a certified service animal. It can't be a self-proclaimed service animal, all right? Something else that I recently learned, because this came up actually for one of our training cruises, I think it was the cruise. Oh, it was the cruise we were supposed to go on in April of this year that got canceled. We were supposed to be cruising on Thursday of this coming week. No cruise for us this fall. Boo! I'm going to be so sad on Thursday. I just want to let y'all know, all right? Because we should be boarding a ship, but we're not. Anyway, someone wanted to come on our training cruise and bring their emotional support animal. And so I had to do a little bit of research on whether or not this emotional support animal would be allowed on the cruise ship. And what I learned through my research is that there is a difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal. All right? Emotional support animals are not protected under ADA law. So I found that to be very interesting right there. All right? So just FYI. Here's probably one of the biggest things that y'all need to know under these fun and exciting ADA facts is that children with disabilities must be placed in age-appropriate classrooms. The opportunity to learn cannot be delayed due to a long-term or short-term disability, especially if accommodations can be made. What do y'all think this applies to in our early education world? Potty training. All right? If you have a child that is not potty trained, you cannot withhold them from moving into another classroom that is age appropriate for them, especially because accommodations can be made. Now, what I see happen a lot is I see a lot of you that say things like, well, we don't move children into the 3-year-old room until they're potty trained. Okay? If you're following that process, if that child is not potty trained due to a disability that has been diagnosed or not, you could have a violation, all right? Especially when accommodations can be made in that 3-year-old room. So those of you that are doing that, I just want to throw caution, all right? Now you get to run your business, you get to make choices that are in the best interest of your school, but just know you need to be careful with that one, all right? There you go. And a lot of times people go, well, we don't have diaper changing tables in a 3-year-old room. So there's nothing in the child care minimum standards that say you have to have a diaper changing table. It just says that children, they must be cleaned up and changed in a sanitary manner. You know, so that's the biggest comeback I get on that one. All right, I want to talk about medications really quick. I already mentioned breathing machines, but there are some medications that fall under ADA protection. EpiPens, so a child that is very allergic to something and could go into shock, so they have an EpiPen that is prescribed to them. That is considered a reasonable accommodation to a special need, and so you have to allow that child in your program, and you must administer the EpiPen if the child goes into shock. All right? So you can't refuse, oh, I'm scared, I don't want to. All right? You could have a claim filed against you, or a lawsuit, or go to jail in this case if the child dies. All right? Make sure that your EpiPens are accessible. That's really big. So where are your EpiPens currently stored? And if you have a child that goes into shock, are they accessible? Can you get to it? Now, so I got a question that popped up on Facebook Live. I'll circle back to it in just a second. So any of y'all that have had experience with EpiPens, you know that if a child goes into shock, you have a very small window of time to administer that EpiPen for it to be effective, right? So if you're in a pre-K classroom that's in the very back of the building and those EpiPens are stored up in the front office and you have a child that goes into shock, by the time you run over to the intercom, call the front office, hey, where are you? I need Johnny's EpiPen, and you go to the box and dig through all 20 EpiPens to find Johnny's, and then you run back to that classroom, you've probably missed your window. Or, I want y'all to really think about when, what are the most allergies that require an EpiPen, and where are the children most likely to be? Well, peanut, is probably one of the biggest ones. Shellfish, is another big one. But otherwise, it would be ant bites, bee stings. Where are you at when that happens? Outside. So that creates even a bigger obstacle of getting that EpiPen and administering it in a timely manner. The question that I got on Facebook Live is, does the potty training apply only to children with disabilities yes, only apply to children with disabilities of all children, or all children. I see what you're saying now. Technically, yes. All right, so technically, if the child not being potty trained is due to a disability, then that's when they've got protection. If it's not due to a disability, you can handle that, whatever is in the best interest of your program. What I want y'all to be cautious of is that the disability may not have been diagnosed yet. All right, so that's where I encourage you to be careful. So that's a good question right there for you. Breathing machines we've talked about, that's a reasonable accommodation. Behavioral management drugs, yes, we want them to get that, all right, but that's a reasonable accommodation. And of course, we're unfortunately seeing more and more children entering our programs that have been diagnosed with diabetes, and they're getting blood sugar testing. And doing blood sugar testing is considered a reasonable accommodation to a special need. It's very different than how it used to be. Nowadays, they've got the fancy little machines and stuff, and there's very little exposure. But if you have someone that's still doing the finger pricking, believe it or not, we have to do that. All right. This is a really important part right here, because we've been living in this world for the last 8 months. But there are infectious diseases that are protected under the Americans with Disability Act. This is a big topic that we're going to see talked about for a long time. All right? I want y'all to imagine 10 years from now. All right? Just imagine the commercials that you're going to see on TV in 10 years. If you wore a mask for more than 4 hours back in 2020, you may be entitled to a class action lawsuit. Did you apply hand sanitizer to your hands more than 3 times a day? Can y'all hear it now? There's going to be so many of those. But yes. So basically, you cannot discriminate against someone that has an infectious disease. Now, prior to the pandemic, it would be people with HIV, people with AIDS, certain forms of hepatitis. All right, that's where the legal protection comes in. Because if you were aware that you had a child in your program that was HIV positive, they would be treated differently. All right. When I talk about this, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but when I talk about this, I have people that get really, their panties in a wad, because they're like, well, I don't think that's right. If I have a child that's HIV positive, or I have a coworker that's HIV positive, I have a right to know. I need to be able to protect myself, Well, no, you don't, because that person's going to be treated differently. Here's the more realistic situation. And I'm willing to bet, because we got a lot of people here that have been doing this for a long time. I'm willing to bet that the majority of the people that are with us today has either worked with someone or have had a child in their classroom or a parent of a child that was HIV positive, and that person didn't even know it yet. That person hadn't been diagnosed yet. That's the more likely scenario. So that's why we follow universal precautions, all right? And universal precautions is basically you treat everyone as if they have an infectious disease, all right? Now, fast forward to 2020, because now we got the COVID, all right? And a person that has tested positive with COVID is going to fall under this protection. And you can't discriminate against someone who has tested positive for COVID. All right? A child that has tested positive. You're going to want to just make sure that you're following your local health department guidelines, of course, Health and Human Services guidelines, the CDC guidelines, and make sure that all of that is very well documented. All right? But this is going to be a hot issue moving forward for sure. Follow your universal precautions. That's what it basically all comes down to. And, you know, I don't want to go down the COVID rabbit hole because we're here to talk about disabilities and special needs, but with our enhanced health practices and the number of times we have to wash hands in our classroom with adults and with children, you know, what the CDC and the health department is realizing, and we've heard this for the last 2 or 3 months now, if you're doing everything in your program that you're supposed to be doing, there's nothing more that you can do. You know, so if you have a positive case in your program and you're doing everything, there's nothing else for you to do. And by the time that person is, you know, tested positive, they've already exposed everyone. You know, so it's kind of like lice. By the time you find the lice, they've already spread it around the classroom. You know, so what else could you do? So, and again, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. You can't discriminate against a child who has life-threatening allergies. Now, of course, we have federal guidelines on food allergies and posting food allergies in our program where food is prepared and where food is served. But the federal guidelines that we follow only cover food allergies. But we know that we have a lot of other children that have other allergies that could be life-threatening, such as ant bites and bee stings and those type of things. We live in North Texas. All right, so you have a child that's deathly allergic to bee stings. You know we got bees. Well, I just don't think I should enroll this child because him being deathly allergic to bee stings could place my program at risk. Well, that is considered discrimination. All right, so you're going to have to figure out a way to accommodate that. Same thing with children with diabetes that we kind of already talked about. All right. Any questions about the Americans with Disability Act? Was that interesting and helpful? Yeah, and that was the very Cliff Note version of it, all right? Now I want to move into suspension and expulsion of children in early education and after-school programs. The United States Department of Labor and the United States Department of Health and Human Services collaborated on a project for many, many, many years, and they were really looking at the impact that expelling a child from your licensed child care center, the impact that has on them for the rest of their life. All right? So it was a very, very interesting study. If you go onto the website, you can actually pull up this entire document that's about this big if you're interested in reading it. I've kind of condensed it down for you, and we're just going to talk about some of the hot points. But in 2016, we did get federal guidelines that require all licensed child care facilities and after-school programs in the United States of America, we are required to have a policy on suspension and expulsion of children. And basically, your policy must say, what steps are you going to take to prevent that child from being expelled? All right? What steps are you going to take to prevent that child from being suspended or expelled? Now, with that being said, you still have a right to expel a child from your program at any point in time. All right? If there is a direct threat, you know, an undue hardship, or a fundamental alteration to your program. All right, and child care licensing even addresses that you still have a right to de-enroll at any time. But you do need to have a policy on what steps you're going to take to prevent that. And I've included this in today's presentation because most of the children that we expel are children with special needs. All right, so I want y'all to be aware of the guidelines. This is one of my most favorite quotes from Dr. Becky Bailey, the founder and the author of Conscious Discipline. And y'all know that I'm a big advocate for conscious discipline. But this is superb right here. Misbehavior is a caution sign pointing to skills children are missing. Punishing behavior does not stop it. The only thing that will change behavior is to teach a new skill, to replace the troublesome behavior. So when we're working with children with special needs and with disabilities, we need to be lending them a lot of new skills. They are very, very limited on the skills that they have. So our role is to look at the behavior and ask yourself, what is the child trying to communicate with this behavior, and what skill is missing? And then what skill do I need to lend to them? All right? And we'll talk about all of that. Punishing behavior doesn't teach a new skill. Think about you when you were a child. And most of us were raised in a household where punishment was used rather than discipline. All right? And how many of you, your mama or your daddy said something to you like, I want you to remember what this feels like, so the next time you think you're gonna stay out late, or whatever it was that you did, you'll remember what this punishment feels like. Did your parents ever say something like that? And did we ever learn? No, because there was no new skill taught. All right? So, yes. So, the knee-jerk reaction to challenging behaviors is that this child who's having a difficult time in the classroom, their behavior is inconvenient to the teacher. I can't take care of the rest of my classroom. I can't meet all of the other children's needs. I can't teach my curriculum because I'm constantly just dealing with this one kid. All right? And it's so inconvenient for me. So then the teacher picks up the phone and calls the director. Hey director, you need to come do something about this kid. All right, well then the director calls the parent, mom and dad, you need to come get your child. All right? Does sending the child home do any good? Does it teach a new skill? Yeah, it teaches a skill that I'm going to get to go home in my environment and sit in front of a tablet and eat goldfish. That's what it's teaching. But now the parent's going, I can't do my job, I can't make money to support my family, I'm paying this facility to care and to educate my child, but they're sending them home, so now this behavior is inconvenient on the parent. All right? What we've got to do right here when we're working with these kids is, how is this behavior, how is this disability or this special need inconvenient for the child? So let's stop focusing on how inconvenient it is for the adult, and let's talk about how inconvenient it is for the child. Do you think the child chose to have this condition? Probably not. All right? Do you think that child woke up this morning and said, I think today is the day I'm going to punch someone in the face. I think today is the day I'm going to run out of the room. No, I don't think that child says that. I bet the child is waking up in the morning going, I hope today is the day that someone understands me. I hope today is the day that someone loves me. That's probably what they're waking up and saying. All right? So we've got to start focusing on how this behavior, how this special need is inconvenient on the child. Now, for most of the kids that fall into this category, this is everyday life for them. They don't know any different. We see this a lot with children that have hearing issues or children that have vision issues. All right? And, when you ask the child, can you see okay? They're like, yeah. Because they don't know any better. Because what they're seeing and what they're hearing is what they've seen and they've heard their entire life. So they don't know to tell you I can't hear or I can't see. All right? So, whatever the other autism, Asperger's, sensory disorders, they just don't know any different. So we got to look at it from that perspective. The other thing is that we live in this world right now where it's our Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu, I want it and I want it right now. We live in a world of instant gratification. You decide you want to watch your favorite TV show, okay, I'll just pull out my phone and I can watch it right here. Or my tablet or my computer. And did you like that episode? Okay, well wait 7 seconds and the next episode will start. All right, and then the next thing you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you've binged the entire series. Do y'all remember back when we used to have to wait a week for the next episode? All right, but we live in this instant gratification world. Well, when it comes to behavior and supporting children with special needs, our knee-jerk reaction is I want an immediate fix. I want this child's behavior fixed and I want it fixed right now. And if it can't be fixed immediately, then he's got to go. But in reality, supporting the children with the special needs, it takes time. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of patience, all right? But there's no instant fix to this. When I do parent workshops, and I do parent workshops on biting, that's the most popular parent workshop, there is no magic wand that I can go, poof, no more biting, all right? I wish, right? If I had a magic wand to go, poof, no more biting, man, I'd be the richest person in the world. All right? But that's not how it works. That's not how it works. It's a process. So we got to get out of that instant gratification mode. Here are just some of the facts I wanted to tell you about the 2016 study that was released. Like I said, it was the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services. We have to have a policy on this, like I said, and we have to support the families. Before we get into the statistics, because I want to share some statistics with you about suspension and expulsion. Y'all heard me say this over and over and over again in different workshops, but all behavior is a form of communication, all right? Especially your children with special needs or disabilities. When they're acting out, when they're having a tantrum or a meltdown. And we're going to talk here in just a little bit about the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. All right? Because I really need y'all to see the difference between the two. What is the child trying to communicate? Okay? They don't have the words to express themselves on what their needs are. So that behavior is their form of communicating. So when you have a child that is having a difficult time in the classroom, what are they trying to communicate? All right? All behavior is an opportunity for you to teach. And all behavior is an opportunity for you to make a difference. And you have to tell yourself, and you have to coach yourself, I can help this child with their need. I can help this child with their behavior. All right? Because it's not the kid's fault. It's not the kid's fault. He didn't choose to be that way. Let me tell you all about some expulsion facts, and let this sink in for just a little bit. All right? Young children who are expelled from their early education program are 10 times more likely to drop out of high school, all right, experience academic failure and grade retention, have a negative attitude about school, and that toddler that you expel from your program for biting is 10 times more likely to face incarceration as an adult. Wow. Is that not mind-blowing? Mind-blowing. All right? There's a guy named DJ Batiste, and if you want to YouTube him, he is part of the Conscious Discipline family, but he has an amazing story, and he's an amazing keynote speaker, but he tells a story about being in high school a member of several gangs and being constantly kicked out of different schools and being expelled and being suspended, and he had this gang life. And it took one teacher to notice him and one teacher to lend him the skills he needed that changed his life and saved him, you know. So it's really, really cool. But I mean, he will sit there and tell you, if it wasn't for this one high school teacher that noticed me and spent time with me, he would be incarcerated or dead, you know, at this point. So you'll have to look that up. I'll post a link after the webinar today. I'll post a link on that. It's really, really good. Children who are expelled from their program also experience social and emotional issues, behavior development, all right? Limited cognitive enrichment experiences that is important for the contribution to healthy development and academic success later in life. And when we expel a child from our program, it could interfere or delay in the diagnosis of a disability. All right? You've already been doing your anecdotal notes. You've already been doing your individualized assessment. But then when you expel them, they're going to go somewhere else and that person's going to start all over. All right? Now, the reason why I focus on this, that young children who are expelled from their early education programs are more likely to have social and emotional and behavior development issues. Most of the children that we have with special needs and disabilities are already struggling with this. And then when we expel them, it makes it times 2. All right, we're multiplying that. When we're going to talk here in just a little bit, when we start talking about supporting children with special needs, the social and emotional part is the biggest part. That's what they're needing, is that social and emotional support. I wanted to share some of these statistics with you and just kind of let these sink in, all right? And again, I wrote this training like 3 years ago, so it's been a while, but think about current times and it's like mind-blowing. So 39% of preschool teachers have reported expelling at least one child in the past year. This is 3 times higher than public schools. So we are 3 times more likely to expel a child from our program rather than offering them support. All right? So we're very quick to just go, you got to go, right there. African American boys make up 18% of preschool enrollment, but 48% of children that are suspended or expelled more than once. Hispanic and African American boys combined make up 46% of their same age peers in preschool and 66% of those that are expelled. And then boys alone make up 79% of the preschoolers suspended or expelled once, and 82% of preschoolers suspended or expelled multiple times. Now, when we look at brain development, and I have a whole training that I do on the difference between a male brain and a female brain, we know that boys are more physically impulsive, all right? So because the male brain is more physically impulsive, obviously there's going to be more physical activity. The number of children that are expelled is going to be higher, all right? Where females, the female brain is more emotional, all right? There's 10 times more blood flowing to the limbic system in the female brain than the male brain. And your limbic system is your emotional state. All right? So obviously, the female is going to be more emotional, where the male has more blood flow going to that physical impulsive part. All right? Now again, take that and apply it to children with a disability. Are your males going to be more physically impulsive when they're having a meltdown? Yes. Okay. The girls are probably going to be more emotional. So I want to really quickly go over with y'all what we call the 7 successful beliefs when supporting these kids, all right? The difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. A tantrum is basically when the child is not getting their way and they get triggered and they just throw a tantrum, all right? A meltdown is when a child is not receiving the support they need based on their special need or their disability. And they get to the point where they just melt down, all right? Tantrums can be controlled. Meltdowns are less likely to be controlled, all right? So when we talk about our kids with special needs, that's important, and I have a whole slide on that here in just a little bit. So really quickly, the 7 successful beliefs, and some of y'all have seen this before. We've covered it in different trainings, but no child can make you angry, all right? No child can make you angry without your permission. So you have to be able to say to that child, don't actually say it, but in your head, you're not going to make me angry today. You're not going to make me frustrated today. You're not going to make me stressed today. All right? I am here to help you. I am here to support you. All right? And I'm not going to give up on you. But you have to be strong enough to say that that child's behavior or that child's special need is not going to frustrate me today. And you're in charge. Okay? Now, you know, what we say here is that those that you put in charge of your feelings, you put in charge of yourself. So when you allow a child to frustrate you, you allow a child to stress you out, you're basically giving your power away. That child that just stressed you out or frustrated you is now in control of your feelings. All right? Same thing with adults, by the way. If you allow another adult to stress you out or frustrate you or make you sad, you've put that person in charge of you. So you have to practice, okay? I'm not going to let this child frustrate me today. I'm not going to let this child stress me out today. I'm in control of my feelings. Now I use the word practice, all right? I need y'all to erase the word try from your vocabulary. All right, we're not going to try. And I got a lot of stuff I'm going to share with you here in just a little bit. We're not going to try these techniques. We're going to practice these techniques. And when you're working with children that have special needs, we've got to practice a lot. You're never going to be perfect at it. All right, but we practice, we practice. Practicing that no one can make you angry, make you stressed, make you frustrated, make you sad without your permission. This takes a lot of practice. All right? You can do it though. The motivation to behave comes from being in a relationship. So when you have a child that comes into your program that they have a special need or they have signs and symptoms pointing to a special need, one of the first things you want to do with that child is to connect with them. You have to reach them before you can teach them. When you are in a relationship with someone, they are more willing to meet your expectations. Now, this is so incredibly important with the kids with special needs because one characteristic of children with special needs is they're very, very hesitant to build a relationship with you. They have a very, very difficult time connecting with others, all right? For whatever reason, there could be multiple reasons why they have a hard time connecting, all right? But your first priority is to connect with that child, build a relationship with that child. And once you do make that connection, you're going to see a big difference in the support that you give them and their behavior, all right? But I mean, how many of y'all are thinking about children that you've had either now or in the past that have had a special need? And would y'all agree that it was very hard making that connection with them? All right? But that is the most critical part. All right? Don't give up on them. Don't give up on them. Then what I have seen in my experience is that when you do make the connection, they're your best friend for life, you know, and y'all build a connection that you're very, very protective of each other. So I see that quite often, all right? So a lot of times if I go into a classroom to help coach a teacher, one of the first things I'll look at is what does the relationship between the adult and the child look like? And is there a connection between that teacher and that child? Or do we need to work on that connection? All right? To work on that connection, number one, you've got to unhook yourself. Be a Q-tip. All right? Quit taking it personal. This is not about you. This is about the child. All right? And one of the biggest skills that I've learned throughout all of this is especially that child that's having a tantrum or a meltdown, this is not happening to you, this is happening in front of you. All right, let that sink in for a second. This is not happening to you, this is happening in front of you. All right, that child having a tantrum or a meltdown, they're not doing it just to mess with you. All right, sometimes I hear teachers say, that kid is out to get me. Do you really think that 2.5-year-old is out to get you? Probably not. All right, probably not. This is happening in front of me. Unhook yourself and then spend time with the child. Children with special needs. Okay, you've got to make sure that you're spending quality one-on-one time with them each day. As little as 5 minutes. 5 minutes of one-on-one time with each child each day will reduce power struggles by 50%. All right? So quality time, just you and that child. And you can still have some other activities going on in your classroom, but you're sitting at the table with that child and that's what they need. All right? But you're going to work on those connections. The third 7 successful belief is that there are only 2 states of being. So children are either calling for love or they're extending love. And I want y'all to think about that when you're talking about behavior. All right, so when a child is having a tantrum or a meltdown, are they calling for love or are they extending love? All right, when that child with a special need is having a meltdown, that behavior is them saying, I need someone to understand me. I need some help here. All right? When they're meeting your expectations, then they're extending love. But even as adults, right now, in this room, and out there on Zoom and on Facebook Live, every single one of us as adults, we're either extending love or we're calling for love. Okay? I either want to meet your expectations and satisfy you, or I need you to understand me right now. All right? Doesn't that feel good? Just to have a moment where you just take a deep breath? Yeah. But this is where it's been so difficult over the last 8 months. It's because we need people to understand us. We're either calling for love or we're extending love. Well, the biggest way that you notice is a person calling for love or extending love is by their face. Okay? Your face is telling me that you don't want to be bothered right now. Your face is telling me that you're tired. All right? Now, if you just go to someone and you say, well, you sure do look tired today. No, I'm fine. Your face is telling me you're tired today. Yes, I am. But it makes a big difference. All right? And we use this in the classroom. Your face is telling me. Oops. But what have we been doing for the last 8 months? We're covering that face up. And it's made it very difficult to see, is that child calling for love or extending love? Because half of the face is covered up. Now, for our young children, they're not wearing masks, but we are. And children are reading our face as well. We've known through infant brain development for years now that the most fascinating object to a child is the human face. That's why when you look at infants, all right, an infant will just sit there and stare at the face. Okay, especially the face of the mother, because that's typically the primary caregiver or the healthy attachment figure. But even those of you that work in an infant room, they just stare at your face. But now we've got half the face covered up. All right? So because of this, what I really need y'all to focus on, because we're having to wear these things right now. Oops, I'm going to be in so much trouble by Miss Leslie. I'm supposed to be using this one. Eye contact. Eye contact is more important now than ever before. That when you're working with your kids and you're having to wear this right here, that you're making that eye contact. And not just making the eye contact, but holding the eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds. I see you. I see you. All right? That's important right there. Now, your children with signs and symptoms pointing to a special need, they need to be seen. Okay? They need to be seen. They need to know that you are aware of them. So these kids need a lot of eye contact. Your kids with special needs, though, how many of y'all have had these kids that they don't make eye contact or they avoid eye contact? This is very, very common for these kiddos. All right? But that's where your connections need to come in. All right? But my eye contact with you, I see you. I really see you. Are you extending love or are you calling for love? All right. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if there are also other ways that you could show that, because I know with specific kinds of autism that could be intimidating or turn the kid away from you.
Sure, absolutely. So the question that we had in class is that are there other ways that you can make that connection, because for some children, especially children with autism, and even children with oversensitivity to sensory disorders, that could be very intimidating, the eye contact. All of these things that we're going to talk about today, you got to ease into it. Ease into it, all right? But you can use other things like, pictures. Children with special needs need a lot of pictures. And if you can use pictures and relate it to sensory at the same time, it's even better, all right? So I'm going to make limited eye contact with you. I'm still going to do it, all right? Limited eye contact with you, but then also having a picture saying, I see you, I understand you, is going to be helpful. And, this is really important, like when you have a new child coming into your program, and you know that that child has a special need or a disability, this is just a paper plate, simple paper plate, all right, that take a picture of the teacher, take a picture of you, and hot glue it onto this plate, and try to get it to the parent at least 2 weeks before the child starts, or as soon as possible. So that way, a couple of weeks before the child starts, they can go, that's my new teacher. Do you see my new teacher? All right. And, they're going to start building that relationship and that connection before they even get into your classroom. And you got to make sure the pictures are big. All right. The younger the child, the bigger the picture. All right. And eyes wide open. Don't be a freak though, but eyes wide open. And the reason why I like paper plates is the edging. For your sensory kids, this is awesome, all right? And they can walk around with the plates and hold this and start making that connection. And even with parent permission, the other children in the classroom, so you could do a whole set of these with the other kids in the classroom and send them home ahead of time, or right after the child starts, if you don't have enough advance notice, give it to them at the beginning so that, again, the child can start making that connection. They're going to feel more comfortable and less intimidated with this paper plate than they are the human, all right? So once they feel comfortable with this plate and the picture, they're going to be more willing to make that connection in person. All right, so really, really cool stuff. And the other thing I love about the paper plates with the pictures on it, if they rip it, if they step on it, if they throw up on it, no big deal, I'll make another one. Super cheap, but yes. All right, kind of jumped ahead on that one, but that was okay. That was a good question. All right, every aggressive act is an opportunity to teach and requires structure, nurture, and presence. So we're going to talk about this quite a bit in the next hour, is that children with special needs they must have structure, nurturing, and presence. Children with special needs, they must have predictability. All right, there has got to be predictability in place. And there's so many different ways that you can do this for the kids. Pictures all around the classroom of what your day is going to look like. And make sure that you're able to change that up. So if you have a card that says we go outside at 10:30, but it's storming outside and it's rainy or it's wet, you need to be able to replace that with whatever you're going to do that day. But the kids need that predictability. And pictures are great because pictures activate a different part of the brain. All right, pictures take the pressure off of having to listen to the spoken words. The other thing we love about using pictures for our young children, especially children with special needs, is that y'all remember that inner speech is immature. So children do not typically have inner speech, that voice that you have inside of your head, until the average age of 7 to 8. So that voice that's constantly talking to us, kids don't have that. What they have are images. Okay? They have images. So the more pictures that we can show them of what their day is going to go like or what the expectations are, the more images they're going to have in their inner speech. All right? And hang on just a second. I'll be right back. And I got tons of these over here, but I want this will do. We make a lot of routine books, all right? Not just for our children with special needs, but all children benefit from this. This is a technique called MAP, M-A-P. And by the way, this is a worksheet question, all right? MAP stands for Model, Add Visuals, and Practice. Model, add visuals, and practice. Now, your children with special needs need a lot of mapping. A lot of mapping. And like this routine book right here is let's get ready for lunch. So when it's time for lunch, we wash our hands. We help our teacher pass out the cups. You pray if that's something you do in your program. We enjoy our meal with our friends. This was a really simple one. I would probably add a couple of more steps in there. But it might be that a child with special needs, you make a routine book that is specifically for that child. With that child, and you can stage it and model it. The pictures that are in this book are that child. All right? And you go through the different stages, and they can walk around with this, and they can carry this, and they can use it as a resource. That's going to give them structure and predictability, which is something that's desperately needed. The other thing about this world that we live in right now, I was talking about this yesterday in my director's workshop, for those of you that were with me yesterday. We know from heart science that anytime you have a true feeling in your heart, anyone that's standing within 6 feet of you can feel any true feeling you have in your heart. All right? That goes both ways, by the way. If you have hatred in your heart, people can feel that too. All right? But a true feeling in your heart, you're committed, you're passionate, you're determined, I'm going to help this child. All right? When that is the true feeling that's in your heart, when that child is within 6 feet of you, they can feel it. Now, what have we been told to do for the last 8 months? Stay 6 feet away from each other. All right? That's scary. Because when we're told to stay 6 feet away from one another, you're not going to be able to feel those electromagnetic waves that are coming off of your heart and your brain. All right? But I get it. We want to control the spread of the virus. We don't want people to get sick. I get it. Doesn't make me happy though, right? So when this pandemic is over, whenever that may be, we got a lot of work to do to repair and reconnect the social and emotional barriers that have been built over the last 8 months. All right? But these kids with special needs, the nurturing part is so important. All right? But that's where, when you go into that classroom and you say, I am going to help this child with their special need, I am dedicated, I am committed, I am passionate, I'm not giving up on this kid. And when that's the true feeling that's coming out of your heart, you will be amazed at the difference. All right? Not only because of your determination, but the child will feel that energy. And this has been scientifically proven. All right? Now, if you walk into that classroom, I do not get paid enough money for this. I don't know why they put that kid in my room. I can't stand this kid. I wish he would drop. All right? Why does he have to be here today of all days? All right? Think about the electromagnetic stuff that's coming off of your heart. And what signal are you sending to that child? Yeah, you're going to have a rough day. I can guarantee it. So, you have to be able to see these kids through loving eyes. All right? You've got to be able to see them through loving eyes. Children must be seen different before they can act different. And the kids with special needs, we have to see them through loving eyes. When you do that, and when you practice positive intent, the outcome is going to be amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right? And the last thing here is you've got to be present. Okay? You can't be in la-la land. Okay? Because they know when you're not there. Mentally not there. All right? And they're going to feel, children with special needs are going to feel a huge disconnect when you're not present. All right? It actually makes them unsafe, makes them feel unsafe. And another thing we know, children must feel safe before they can behave. Children must feel safe before they can learn. All right? Adults must feel safe before we can meet expectations. All right? So with your kids with special needs, I really need y'all to look from that child's version of reality. Does that child feel safe in your classroom? All right? And if you're having a lot of struggles with this kid and he's having a lot of meltdowns, it might be because he doesn't feel safe in your room from his point of view, from his version of reality. So you got to do that. But again, this is where, okay, we got our work cut out for us. Because when we're wearing these and we're staying 6 feet away from each other, and we got all the media and the social media and all these people talking about the pandemic and the economy and the politics that are involved in all of it, do people feel safe right now? No. A lot of people don't feel safe. Therefore, expectations can't be met. All right? So we've got to create that sense of safety in your classroom. Know that there are no bad children. There's no such thing as a bad child. All right? There's no such thing as a good child. You just have children in your classroom. Children that are trying to communicate with you. Children that are giving you the opportunity to teach. Children that are giving you the opportunity to make a difference. All right? That it's not that they're bad. They just need new skills. We got to lend them some new skills right here. Children can only meet the needs of other children when their own needs have been met first. Okay, so you cannot have a child meet expectations of the other children until their own needs are met first. Children with special needs, all right, have a very, very difficult time with empathy. All right? They're struggling to identify with themselves. So it's very, very difficult for them to identify with other individuals' feelings. So you're going to do a lot of activities in your classroom on empathy and acts of service. All right? And giving that child some assignments where they will be of service to the other children. You want to do this with everybody, not just this child, but everybody, so that we can teach that empathy. All right? But empathy is an important part. They really struggle with that right there. but they can't meet the needs of other children until their own needs have been met first. All aggression stems from the perceived experience of excessive pain. And when I talk about excessive pain, that could be mental, that could be physical. And a lot of your children with special needs have a lot of excessive pain. All right, because again, they're struggling to identify themselves. All right. Now, let's get into talking directly about children with special needs and how we can make modifications for these kiddos. All right. So what is a special need and who has a special need? Here's the deal. Every single one of us in this room, every single person out there in Facebook and on Zoom, at some point in time in your life, you've had a special need. Every single one of us, at some point in time, we were going through something and we needed a little bit more attention. We needed things to be done a little bit differently for us at that time, right? And again, most of it's temporary, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, but we've all had a special need at some point in time. So, you know, we've gotten, over the last 15 to 20 years, we've really done a horrible job of labeling these kids and stereotyping them. And if you have a child that does not fall into this cookie cutter model, then they get a label on them. And then they get sent to the inclusion classroom or they get sent to whatever down the hallway. And they are growing up made to feel indifferent. All right? But in reality, we all have a special need at some point in time. All right? When I was growing up, and this is always a good topic of conversation, you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have autism and Asperger's and ADD and ADHD. I never remember a child with a peanut allergy or, you know, shellfish or any of that stuff. So where did all this stuff come from? And did we have it back then and we just didn't know it? Or is this something new? You know? Well, I don't know the answer to that. All right? I don't know the answer to that. But we have gotten into this society where we want to stick labels on people. All right? And we want to make people feel indifferent. Where when I was growing up, our teachers just taught us the way we needed to be taught. And every single student in the classroom, the teacher did something different. All right? That we were never labeled or put, you know, in this special classroom. That's what we've got to do here. I was doing a conference down in Houston. I feel like I'm picking on Houston today. I was doing a faith-based conference down there a couple of years ago, and this lady was talking about her child care facility was located inside of a public school. They actually leased space from a public school. And she said it's really nice because when I have a child that has special services, instead of the bus having to come and pick them up and you have that transition and everything, she goes, it's really nice because we just send him down the hallway, he gets his services, he comes back. And she goes, it's really cool to watch him go down to this classroom, this special classroom, and the way these teachers interact with him and the techniques that they use and the games they play with him is so cool. And I'm just looking at her going, well, why can't you do that? You know, if these interactions and these games are so awesome and they're benefiting the child, why can't we do that in our classrooms? Why does he have to go to a special room to receive this? You know? And she goes, well, we don't have the training. Well, let's get the training then. All right? Let's get the training so that we can support these kids. So it was kind of a little aha moment right there. But we can do this. I threw in some facts for autism because this is the most common special need that we see in our early education programs these days. But currently, autism affects about 1.5 million children in the United States, or 1.5 million people in the United States. All right? Autism describes certain brain development disorders that lead to difficulties in social interactions and communication. All right? So again, that social and emotional piece is really important for these kids. They have a very hard time with social interaction. They have a very hard time with communication. So you're going to give them a lot of new skills and tools so that they can interact in an appropriate way and appropriate ways for them to communicate. All right? Again, I'm going to go back to mapping. Okay? Model, add visuals, and practice. Did y'all know this, that autism is 4 to 5 times more common in boys than girls? Okay, so that's very interesting right there, especially when, like I said earlier, boys are more physically impulsive, girls are more emotionally impulsive. So, but 4 to 5 times more common in boys than girls. And then the current statistic is that 1 in 59 children in the United States are identified as having signs and symptoms of autism. So you think about the number of children that are in your facility, all right? You probably have 2 to 3 kids that fall into this category, if not more, all right? Symptoms and signs are shown they show up between the ages of 2 and 3. They're typically not diagnosed until the age of 4. And this is what we talked about earlier, the number of kids that we've had in our toddler, 2-year-old, 3-year-old classrooms that you're like, yep, the signs are there. We don't have to wait for this diagnosis. We can start supporting these kids now, all right? Not wait for that diagnosis. We can start supporting them now. As of right now, there's no medical cure for autism. And then I thought this was another interesting fact that about 40% of people with autism have an average to higher intelligence. They're typically very, very smart. Very, very smart. All right. So, yeah. So early intervention is so critical for these guys. So those of you that are in the infant toddler classroom, the 2-year-old classroom, wake up. It's time to pay attention. All right. Here are some red flags, all right, that you need to be looking for. So when you have children in your program that have some of these red flags, we need to work with these kids. So you have a child that in your infant toddler program that no big smiles or other warm, joyful expressions by 6 months or after. You know how sometimes you have these kids that they're just there. All right? But when you do something funny or you make a noise, they don't smile and they don't laugh. That's a big red flag right there. Now, the most important activity that you can do here, all right, and this is not just infant toddlers. This is preschool, pre-K, your after-school program, all right? Y'all know one of the best social and emotional games that you can play with your kids. Where's Mr. Tim? Here I am. Oh, where did I go? What is this game called? Peekaboo. We've all played peekaboo at some point in time, right? But you know the biggest part of this, all right, is going, where did Mr. Tim go? Here I am. All right? The most important part of this game is that, all right? And it's called startling. And I know normally when we hear the word startle, we think of fear or you frighten the child, all right? And while startling can frighten or scare someone, it's actually an attention getter, all right? And we have what's called mirror neurons in our brain, mirror neurons, that when you're interacting with somebody, especially when you're present, all right, and you're involved, your mirror neurons kick in. And so when the teacher does this, what does the child typically do? They mirror it, you know, but they will mirror it with excitement and a smile, all right? And that's why you know, especially new parents, they do it over and over again because they just can't get enough of that expression that you're seeing from the child. And that's your mirror neurons, all right? Y'all remember sports? No, they're out there. We're starting to see more football games, and hockey, of course, just ended, and you know, baseball games and everything. At some point, we'll be able to go back to going to a sporting event live. But if you ever want to test the theory of mirror neurons, a sporting event is a great opportunity. So like if you're watching a soccer game and the guy's running and he's about to kick the ball and he's going to make the game-winning goal, and he kicks the ball and the ball just barely goes over the net and he doesn't make the score. And then you see the player go, "Oh!" And then what does the entire crowd do? "Oh!" Watch it. I want y'all to start paying attention to this. And it's harder on TV, but when you're in person, you really see it. That's mirror neurons. All right? But that's what we do. And with the kids with autism, okay, or with special needs, because we know about mirror neurons, we can really help these kids with that social development. But you're going to model these reactions that you're looking for. All right? Now, don't go, look at me, do what I do what I do. We want it to be natural. All right? We want it to be natural. No back and forth sharing of sounds, sharing of smiles, or facial expressions by 9 months. That is an indicator of autism as well. So when you're mimicking and you're making different faces, all right, the child should be, repeating what you're doing and mimicking you. That's what we want to see right there. If they're not, if they're just giving you a blank stare, we need to work with this child some more. All right? But even up into the toddler, 2-year-old, 3-year-old room, mimicking that back and forth sharing of sounds, smiles, facial expressions is really important. Now, a technique that we use right here is noticing. And when you're working with your kids with special needs, you want to do a lot of noticing. Now, I've already told you about the face. Your face is telling me you don't want to go outside right now. Your face is telling me you want to continue to play in the block center. It's hard, isn't it? But your face is telling me. With noticing, especially when you have a child that's having a tantrum or a meltdown, you've got tears coming down your face and your arms are crossed like this. Something happened. What happened? All right? Now, when I tell a child, when I go up to a child and I say, you've got tears coming down your face and your arms are crossed like this, what is the child going to do at that point? They're going to look at you. All right? The moment that child looks up, because you say, you've got tears coming down your face and your arms are crossed like this, they're going to look at you. Make that eye contact. There's your opportunity for that eye contact without intimidation. And the moment you get that eye contact, all right, you've got tears coming down your face and your arms are crossed like this, boom, I just got eye contact. Something happened. What happened? All right? We're going to download calm to that child. Okay? But you also need to make sure that you're calm. Now, children with special needs, we get triggered and frustrated very easily, don't we? We tend to have very little patience with these kids. So the adult being able to regulate is very, very critical. All right? But with noticing, all right, and eventually when you continue to practice this and continue to practice this, you're going to notice that, oh, you've got tears coming down your face and your arms are crossed. Okay? You'll start seeing the child go, that's good. All right? That's good. That's progress right there. Because it's the back and forth sharing of the sounds, the smiles, the facial expressions. Good stuff right there. No babbling by 12 months of age, back and forth gestures by 12 months of age, words by 16 months could be an indicator of autism, and no meaningful 2-word phrases by 24 months. The first 2 that I discussed are the biggest ones that I want y'all to be aware of right here for these kiddos. Something else that you may see with children with special needs is that there may be an obsession with certain objects. All right. So the way this works is, I'm going to pick you up. The way this works is that we have an attachment system in our brain, and every single child, every single adult has what's called their attachment system. And when the world doesn't go their way, okay, so when the world is not going your way, your attachment system comes on, it comes online, and you seek out your healthy attachment figure. And that healthy attachment figure is a person that makes you feel safe. All right, someone that loves you unconditionally, someone that makes you feel safe, someone that understands you. And even as adults, how many of y'all, when the world is not going your way, you have a person that you can go to that makes you feel safe and loved? All right, that's your healthy attachment figure. All right, now typically in a textbook situation, the attachment figure should be the mother. All right, because the child was in her womb, because the mother is typically the primary caregiver, the mother is typically the healthy attachment figure, but not always. It could also be a father, it could also be a grandparent. What we're seeing these days is that because 75% of the children in this country are in some type of group care situation, and out of that 75%, 80% of those kids spend more of their waking hours with us than they do their own families. Who has become the healthy attachment figure? We have. All right? Very, very common that we're seeing this. So when you have a child that the world is not going their way and they don't feel safe, they're looking for you to make them feel safe and loved. Now, when the attachment system is on, when the attachment system is online and someone is seeking out their attachment figure, no learning can take place. No problem solving can take place when the attachment system is on. Once the child feels safe and they know that they're loved, the attachment system goes offline, then you can learn. Then you can meet expectations. I'm describing this to you because you have a lot of children with special needs that spend a lot of time with their attachment system online. They're seeking that person to make them feel safe and loved. All right? But like I said, no learning can take place when the attachment system is on. Now, like I said, the brain is wired to have a healthy attachment figure with another human. But sometimes with children with special needs, because they are already struggling with social interaction and connection, they push the human away, and I'm going to set you down. Instead, they find a materialistic object to connect with. And this materialistic object is going to be the thing that makes me feel safe. How many of y'all have seen this? A child that is attached to a materialistic object. And heaven forbid you try to take this away from them. Or another child tries to play with it. Complete and total meltdown, right? Because this object has become their attachment system. When you have this in your classroom, this is a child where you need to spend a lot of time with them. You need to connect with them. You need to reach them. We got to get them to put this object down and build an attachment with you. Okay? We also see this, by the way, side note conversation. We also see this with individuals that have experienced trauma, and that when you have individuals with unresolved trauma, they tend to push the human attachment figure away and they become attached to a materialistic object, or as an adult, they become attached to addictions. All right? I'm going to look for an alternate source for the joy juice and the dopamine that's released from the brain that makes us feel good. If they're not getting that from a human, they're going to find it from another source, which is typically drugs, alcohol, and other type of addictions. So that's a whole nother training right there. All right. Are we going to have people that have unresolved trauma after the pandemic? Yeah. Children, are we going to have children that have unresolved trauma due to the pandemic? Yes. So again, we need to start getting ready for this because we're going to see this in our programs, and we need to be able to support these kids and these families. All right. I just read an article a couple of weeks ago about this new form of depression that they're starting to diagnose due to the pandemic and the shelter in place and the inability to be around other individuals and the physical distancing and the mask. And it was a very, very interesting article about this new form of depression. And the whole time I was reading it, I was like, yep, totally see it. Totally see it. And I see it in people. All right? So yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole though. Children with autism and special needs have a prolonged interest in common occurrences. Now, the brain is a pattern-seeking organ. So even as adults, we're very, very, we want patterns, we want sequences, we want predictability. All right? Very, very routine-based. These kids you'll see are very, very attached to it. So that's why I said earlier, predictability is the key to success. The more you can predict in your classroom, the better off you're going to be. All right, you establish that predictability. But even like as an adult, how many of y'all, when you get up in the morning, you have your whole routine. You get up out of bed, you go to the bathroom, you get in the shower, you do your deodorant, brush your teeth, whatever, and life is good. But what happens when in the middle of your routine, your child or your spouse comes in and they interrupt you and you have to step away from your routine first thing in the morning, or the phone rings. And then you go handle whatever issue just came up, and then you come back in the bathroom and you're like, where was I? And you literally have to think for a minute, where did I stop? And then you spend the entire rest of the day going, did I put deodorant on? I can't remember, because our routine was interrupted. All right, and it throws the entire day off. That is a great example of how pattern-seeking the brain is. All right? But these kids, you got to really, really put a strong focus on it. All right? And if they do have a prolonged interest in something, I don't recommend that you interrupt that. All right? Let them have that prolonged interest. Sometimes it's like, okay, you've played with the baby doll way too long now. It's time to go to blocks. And then you have a meltdown. All right? There's no harm in them having this prolonged interest. All right? Now, if it's time for lunch, it's time for outside, that's where we need to have that predictability in place, because that's when we typically see the meltdowns right there, when you're making that big transition. Ritualistic behaviors, all right, and a lot of repetitive behaviors. Again, this is evidence of the pattern-seeking brain, all right, and that need for patterns. So you'll see that. So, what do we do for these kids? What do we need to do for our children with special needs? This is like the 20th time I've said it now. Structure and predictability. Okay, structure and predictable routines is so important. Map, model, add visuals, practice. Give them tools. All right, and create tools, whether it's a routine book or again going to my paper plates. And instead of pictures of the kids, you could have pictures of your routine. All right, that they can just go from, I'm going to walk to the sink, I'm going to turn the water on, I'm going to stick my hand under it, I'm going to put soap on my hands, I'm going to rub them together for 20 minutes, whatever your routine is right there. I've even made your routines and your rituals with the bigger popsicle sticks like this. This is another one that we're talking about making new friends and the social development, but I've done it with routines as well. Your children that you're supporting with special needs, all right, you need to be very, very aware of your classroom distractions. How many of you have ever had a child that you were in a good space and everything was going great until that director walked in to ask you a question, and when they were walking out, the door slammed. And the moment that door slammed, meltdown. Okay? I see a lot of you shaking your head like, yep, that was yesterday. All right? So, and it might be that if you identify that this child is very easily distracted, all right, and the distraction is causing the meltdown, then we need to have conversations with whomever is coming into your classroom causing that distraction. Hey, can you stop coming in my room unless it's absolutely necessary? And it might even be that you put a sign outside of your classroom that says, please limit distractions, to emergency situations only or something, if you know that you've got that child. Where are they at? Oh, here they are. This right here is just a pair of earmuffs from Home Depot. They're like $12, I think. They're for people that do like jackhammers and construction workers and stuff, people that deal with loud machinery, but you can put these on and it cuts the sound. These are great for these kids that have issues with distractions. And I would recommend getting 3 or 4 pair of these, all right? Because sometimes when I do this training, I have people go, well, if I have one child that is super sensitive to distractions and they want to go over and they want to put the headphones on, then you've got 3 or 4 other kids that go, oh, I want to wear headphones too. All right? That's okay. Let them wear a headphone. What's it going to hurt? All right? The main thing working with children with special needs, we don't want them to feel shamed or indifferent. All right? So having a couple of other kids wear the earmuffs, okay, probably going to be better for them. All right? But again, you can get these at any hardware type store. A lot of verbal reminders of what's going to happen next. All right, so we're constantly telling these kids what is about to happen. All right, in 5 minutes we're going to do this. In 10 minutes we're going to do this. Are you ready? Are you super excited to go outside? Yay! And your excitement and your mood. All right, but a lot of verbal reminders. Picture cues, I've already talked about the importance of pictures. And then lots and lots of social development. All right. I would even go as far to say, when you are supporting children with special needs, that the social development, 95% of your time is spent on social development. Okay? Everything else will fall into place once they gain those social skills. So, when you have a child that is communicating through language, all right, because remember, all behavior is a form of communication. We want to ask ourselves, what is that child trying to tell us? Ask yourself these questions. What was the child doing right before the behavior started? So whether it's a tantrum or a meltdown or an aggressive act, all right, what was the child doing right before it started? What was the environment like? And was there something in the environment that triggered the behavior? What was the child trying to say through their behavior? So what are they communicating? And can I predict when this child is about to have a meltdown? How many of you have had kids that you could literally see it? They're about to melt down. All right? What you want to focus on with these type of questions right here, this is what we call practicing teaching. And it's no different than a doctor or a nurse practicing medicine. That we practice teaching in our classroom. When you have a child that comes into your program, whether it's a special need or not, you don't immediately know what factor is causing that behavior. All right? You don't immediately know what they're trying to communicate. You don't immediately know what skill do we need to lend them. So we practice teaching, and it's a process of elimination. Well, let's take a look. Maybe this is the factor that's causing the behavior. All right? Nope, that wasn't it. Let's look at something else. Nope, that wasn't it. Maybe it's this. Oh, there it is. I just found the factor that's causing the behavior. Now let's practice what skill needs to be lended to this child. Oh, that one, didn't make a difference, so let's try another one. And you're going to do a process of elimination until you get there. That's called practicing teaching. Sometimes I have people that come into my workshops and they're like, we had this kid in our classroom. We've tried everything and nothing works. How many of y'all have heard that or something similar to that? Well, when I have someone say that, first off, if I have a teacher that says, we have a child in our classroom, we've tried everything and nothing works, who's the first person we need to work on? The adult. All right? The adult. We need to work on the adult first. There is something that will work. You have not tried everything. All right? But it's typically the adult's behavior and their intentions is what's causing the problem. All right? But we can get there. So, y'all have seen me, I'm sure y'all have seen me do this before, but, when a child walks into your classroom, they walk in with a bag of skills. All right? Children with special needs, they come into your classroom with a bag of skills. And when the world doesn't go their way, all right, they reach into their bag and they pull out whatever skill they've got. And a lot of times we get frustrated because they're not handling a situation the way we would like for them to handle it. But in reality, they can only use the skills they've got, and they just don't have that skill in their bag. So that's why it's our job as teachers to lend skills to the children. And you have to lend a skill 2,000 times in context before they have it in their bag. You can't just lend it once. All right? I'm going to lend you this skill and we're going to practice it 2,000 times in context. Now, you have to have the skill first. You can't lend what you don't have. All right? But these kids with special needs, I need y'all to understand that they can only use the skills they have in their bag. We have to lend them new skills. 2,000 times in context. So do you see where I said earlier, this is a process. This takes time. All right? And we can do that. And we're going to model those skills. We're going to teach, we're going to practice, we're going to model. Teach, practice, and model. I've already talked about the power of perception. No one can make me angry without my permission. All right? I'm in control of my feelings. You've got to have positive intent when working with these kids. All right? So the adult has to be composed first. And y'all all know what it means to be a star, right? We practice being a star quite often, but this is one of your worksheet questions for those of you that are out there in virtual world. Smile, take a deep breath, and relax. Okay? Or stop, take a deep breath, and relax. All right? I'm safe. Keep breathing. I can help this child with their problem. Children with special needs must have adults that are composed. When you are not maintaining your composure, all right, you're not going to be able to reach these kids. So, the secret to success is you being able to stay composed. They need it. I am safe. Keep breathing. I can help this child with their problem. And sometimes, especially when that child is having a meltdown, we just need to take a step back and send well wishes. I'm going to send positive energy to this child. I'm going to send love to this child. Because right now, during his meltdown, the world is not going his way. He's not getting the support that he needs. All right, I'm just going to send well wishes. And I'm going to be there for him to make sure that he knows he's safe. And then when he gets done with his meltdown, I'm going to be there for him to provide that nurturing and that structure. All right? So Again, connections are critical. Got to connect, got to have that relationship. Make sure that that social awareness is being in place, all right? Eye contact we've already talked about, and especially now that we've got these masks, eye contact is even more important than ever before. Acts of service. So making sure that the child is being of service to the other children, because remember, they can't meet the needs of others until their own needs have been met. So we really got to practice the empathy right there. Children with special needs struggle with empathy. All right. Some tools that we can use to help these kids, and a lot of you have seen these before, but you know, this is something we make very, very simple. It's a breathing icon. Children with special needs, we really need to work with them on breathing and being able to stay composed and stay regulated. So smell the flower, blow the pinwheel. My pinwheel didn't want to move at first. Smell the flower, blow the pinwheel. The 5 steps to self-regulation I have found to be so extremely helpful with these kids. All right? So extremely helpful. Now, the first step in the 5 steps of self-regulation is being able to identify that you have been triggered. And remember, we've talked about this in so many different workshops. When you are triggered, you are always the last person to know. Everyone around you knows that you have been triggered except for yourself. For children with special needs, it's very difficult for them to be able to recognize that they have been triggered. All right? So we're going to work on that. Once you can identify that you have been triggered, step number 2 is to calm. All right? This is probably the most important step. So whether we do breathing tools, we can do a balloon where you go... And there's so many other ones, but we want to provide them the opportunity to breathe and to calm. Sometimes that means having a safe place in your classroom, an area of the classroom that the child can go to safely calm. Now, when you have a safe place or a quiet area in your classroom for calming, this is not an area of the classroom that you send children to. This is an area of the classroom that they choose to go to calm. If I send you to safe place, what does it become? It becomes timeout. All right? It becomes a form of punishment. All right? It has to be their choice to go over there and calm. All right? Name your feelings. So the 3rd step in self-regulation is the ability to say, I am sad, or I am angry. Okay? You know, and we do this. Now, in conscious discipline, we have what we call feeling buddies. And a lot of you have feeling buddies in your classroom. But this is where a child is able to go over and say, I'm angry. All right, well, when you're angry, let's go get the angry buddy and let's take care of angry. All right? And the purpose behind these feeling buddies, whenever you have a child and you're going to coach them, and this is so good with the kids with special needs, but when you're able to coach them and the child goes and they get their angry buddy and they say, your eyes are going like this and your mouth is going like this, you seem angry. Now remember, that's noticing right there. All right? DNA stands for describe, notice, and affirm. Yeah. So your eyes are going like this, and your mouth is going like this. You seem angry. Breathe with me. I'm here to keep you safe. And what we're teaching right here is that what you offer to others, you strengthen within yourself. So what you offer to others, you strengthen within yourself. So when you have a child that's taking care of their feeling buddies, they're actually helping themselves. Now, your kids with special needs, all right? You got sensory going on here. These feeling buddies feel really cool, all right? Physical touch, We're practicing the eye contact, all right? The ritual and the routine, the predictability with what we're saying to our buddy. We're meeting every one of those critical characteristics needed to support children with special needs. Y'all see that? Now, I was doing a parent workshop at one of our schools, and I was doing the 5 steps to self-regulation, and I had this very sarcastic father that was like, well, I don't understand why you have happy and calm. And you've got these 6 negative emotions, but what's the deal with happy and calm? That doesn't make sense to me. And I said, okay, well, let's imagine that you have a child with autism, and you've been practicing using your feeling buddies and practicing the 5 steps to self-regulation. And you have a child with autism that goes over to the feeling buddies all on their own without you coaching them, and they get happy. And that autistic child goes, hello, happy. Welcome, happy. Your eyes are like this, and your mouth is like this. You seem happy. I'm here to keep you safe. Imagine an autistic child doing that. Do you know how much progress you just made? Okay, that is unbelievable. Okay, super awesome. Or a child with ADD, a hyperactivity disorder, and that ADHD child goes over to Calm, and they grab Calm and they go, hello, Calm. Welcome, Calm. Your eyes are like this. Your mouth is like this. You seem calm. I'm here to keep you safe. A hyperactive child just did that with Calm. How remarkable. Isn't that cool? All right? You've just made a lot of progress. So being able to name your feelings. And y'all, it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay for a child to be angry. It's okay for a child to feel frustrated. It's okay for you to have those feelings too. All right? We just want to be aware of them. All right? We want to be aware of them. Children with special needs, they need to know that their feelings are validated, that their feelings are okay. Because so many times we try to discount them, or tell the child they're wrong. When that 2-year-old, mom drops off, and as soon as mom leaves, that 2-year-old is over there going, ah! And the teacher sitting over here going, you're fine, come over here, sit down in circle time, stop, you're fine. Every morning she does it. Well, obviously she's not fine, all right? That's when we're going to walk over to that child. Your arms are up in the air like this, and your feet are stomping like this. Eye contact. Something's wrong. What's wrong? Mommy! It's hard. It's hard when mommy leaves. Mommy will be back at 5 o'clock. I'm going to keep you safe while you're in my classroom. Yeah. That's what they need. It's hard. It's hard when mom leaves. But acknowledge those feelings. Once you're able to recognize that you have been triggered, you're able to calm, you're able to name your feelings, then step number 4 is that the child makes the choice to solve the problem. Okay? Whatever the problem may be. But the choice has to be theirs. Otherwise, it's not natural. All right? Choices are so important to children with special needs. Choices creates empowerment. Typically, your children with special needs are really, really struggling with their self-identity and their self-esteem. All right? So anything we can do to help boost that self-worth, that self-esteem is going to be great for these kids. All right? Choices create empowerment. So the choice to solve the problem has to be theirs. And then step 5 is to solve the problem. All right? Whatever that may be. So I could do a whole hour-long training just on that part right there. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Can you just explain a little bit the difference between a disability and a special need?
Sure. A disability is where you have one or more major life function that is altered. All right. So and it could be permanent or temporary, but a major life function has been altered. That's a disability. A special need is just when you have something going on in your life right now that may be temporary or permanent, that things have to be done a little bit different. But a major life function is not altered. All right. So, you know, a child not being potty trained. You know, that would be more of a special need and not a disability, unless it's attached to another diagnosis. But the difference between the two, a special need and a disability, is there a major life function that is altered? That's your clinical answer. All right. My answer is treat everything as a special need. Okay.
Can you say that again? What special needs is what?
A disability is when a major life function has been altered. All right. A special need is just when you need things done a little bit different based on what you're going through right now. Okay, physical, mental condition type of thing. Really quickly, because we are running out of time. What happened? Is my clock right? I wanted to really quickly go through sensory processing issues, and I'll probably follow up with a whole other training on this topic. But you know, a sensory processing issue are difficulties with organizing and responding to information that comes through the senses. All right. Children may be oversensitive to sensory input, or they may be undersensitive to sensory input. And in some cases, you have kids that are both oversensitive and undersensitive. And that would be certain sounds, sights, smells, textures, and taste that could create a sensory overload. All right. We see this a lot in our early education programs, don't we? All right, especially our kids with special needs. So like I said, there's two different types of sensory processing challenges: oversensitivity and undersensitivity. So signs and symptoms of a child that has sensory avoiding, all right? So they don't like sensory type situations. Children that are overwhelmed by people and places. So for some children that are struggling with sensory issues, it might be that there's too many children in that classroom for that particular child. All right, so if you've got a large class with a whole lot of kids, that could be very overstimulating for that particular child. All right, overwhelmed by the environment. You know, I walked into a school, not any of y'all's. I walked into a school just recently, and this pre-K teacher, bless her heart, she was so excited about her classroom. And as soon as she saw me, she was like, "Mr. Tim, you got to come see my room." I walked in and I was like, whoa, there's a lot going on in here. It was beautiful and she was so proud of it, but I was like, there is a lot going on in this room. So I let her tell me, you know, blah, 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 a few things and everything. And then I was like, well, let's talk about your classroom management. How, you know, it's September. You just got a new group of kids that transitioned into your room. How's your classroom management going? And she was like, well, I've got a few kids that I'm having a really hard time with. And I'm like, well, what's going on? So, you know, basically it's tantrum and meltdowns. And I'm like, well, have you considered that it might be your environment? That, you know, your classroom might be overstimulating. Because me just being in that room, I was like, oh, there's a lot going on in here, you know? And it was a hard conversation because she was so proud of it. But, you know, I know that, you know, Christmas time is coming up, and you know, from the beginning of October until January is my most favorite time to be in this business. I love it so much. But I can't go into like those Christmas stores that's nothing but Christmas decoration and Christmas stuff. because it's too overstimulating for me. Like, I go bonkers. And even Christmas shopping, all right, can't do it. Too many people, okay, it blows my mind. So I probably have sensory avoiding issues, you know, right there. But think about that from a classroom standpoint. But I've also done the opposite, where I've walked into classrooms that were understimulated. There wasn't enough to engage the child. So you've got to look at the group of children that you have right now, and is your classroom got a good balance of stimulation for your current group? And it may change next year. All right? So, you know, if you have a child that seeks out quiet spots whenever the classroom gets super noisy, y'all might see that child that whenever the classroom is starting to get a little chaotic, they kind of go off behind a cubby or over in a corner. That would be sensory avoiding right there. We've already talked about easily startled by loud noises. Bright lights. All right. Now, we've talked a lot today about the difference between boys and girls. Isn't that interesting? And the topic is about supporting children with special needs. But one thing we know about the difference between the male brain and the female brain is that males prefer to learn in bright light. Females prefer to learn in dim lights. All right? So when we talk about sensory avoiding situations, all right, it might be that the boy, it's too dim, it's too dark in the classroom, and that is stimulating them. Or for the girl, it's too bright, and that's causing her to react. So again, you got to find that big balance. This room right here, I've had a hard time adjusting to this room since I've had this training room, because it's kind of dim back there, you know, where y'all are sitting. Now, the ladies that are here, y'all are probably loving it. This is the perfect lighting for me. You know, but I've had to open this window and put in a brighter light and have this thing up here because it was too dark for me. You know, so it's really interesting how that works right there. The clothing that they're wearing, if their clothing is too itchy, too tight, that could create an issue for sensory avoiding children. They don't like people to touch them or hug them. That would be a sensory avoiding type situation. Certain foods, certain smells may set them off into a meltdown, and with that, they're going to refuse to give certain foods a try. All right? They're going to stick to what they can predict and what they know tastes good to them. All right? And of course, sensory avoiding children get very, very upset when there is a small, tiny little change in their routine. You know, there's your meltdown. Now, your sensory seeking children, so your children that are looking for more sensory, they're just the opposite of all this. These are your kids that are constantly touching, constantly touching. I gotta touch everything. How many of y'all have these? You know, I gotta touch, 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 touch. So with these kids, your sensory boards, your sensory tables are gonna be very, very critical for their development. Sensory seeking children typically have very vigorous and rough play, so they like to rumble and tumble and fall on the ground and do all that kind of stuff. Because of that, sensory seeking children have a high tolerance for pain. All right? And how many of y'all have had kids that got hurt in the classroom and they didn't even know it? And at the end of the day, mom is like, hey, what happened? And the kid's like, I don't know. You know? That type of thing. They squirm, they fidget a lot. So for your sensory seeking children, fidget boxes. All right, so boxes kind of like what I have over there that are full of items that they can fidget with. Whenever you're making a transition from one activity to the next, they need those fidgeting tools, all right, to help them stay focused right there. These kids are constantly on the move, and they're constantly invading other people's space. So this is where we want to do an activity on spatial awareness and being able to identify the space around you. I just did a workshop last month before last, on physical activities in the preschool classroom. So if y'all want to go back and watch that webinar, it's on my website, but I talk a lot about spatial awareness in that particular workshop. I always think, y'all remember that movie Dirty Dancing? Where Patrick Swayze is like, this is my space, this is your space, you know. I always think of that whenever I get to this point right here. They get very easily distracted, they're very anxious, they're very clumsy, and appear to be very uncoordinated. So with these sensory-seeking kids, a lot of activities that involve crossing the midline, and a lot of activities that involve bilateral integration, which is moving both sides of your body at the same time. So jumping jacks, push-ups, all right? Those type of things are going to be really good. And I think that's actually the next thing right here. Yeah. Physical activity is really important for these kids. All children with special needs, we need to put a big focus on physical activities. And of course, we know that we have new regulations coming out in the state of Texas. Sometime this fall, we're going to get our new regulations on physical activities in our preschool classrooms. I'm super excited about this, all right? But we're going to be required to have 90 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity in our classrooms with the new standards. Y'all, it's going to make the biggest difference in the world. I'm so excited for this, all right? But you're really going to see a big benefit with these kids right here, because some of the physical activities that we can do is really going to support them with their special needs. The jumping jacks, all right? So again, moving both sides of your body at the same time. And you're probably going to notice the kid does this. So their arms are going back and forth, but their legs aren't. They're just hopping up and down. So we're going to practice. We're going to work with them. And y'all also know that when you do jumping activities with the children, it releases endorphins in your brain. So you get joy juice whenever you do jumping activities. That's going to help with that natural feeling of self-confidence and self-worth. So lots of activities. Rolling on a therapy ball, rolling pins, because when we do a rolling pin, we're crossing the midline, all right? And we're going to have to practice, because you're going to see the kid just doing this, or just doing this, or they're going to move their whole body when they're doing the rolling pin. So it's hard for these kids to cross their midline. So we're going to practice that. Hopping up and down, climbing on ladders, going down ladders, those things are really helpful for these kids. So the accommodations that I want to throw out here for this one, allow the children to use the fidgeting tools. All right. So many times teachers want to, when they're trying to get control of their classroom, you want to put the fidgeting tools away because you think the fidgeting is causing more chaos. The fidgeting is actually helping. All right. So allow them the opportunity to fidget, especially these sensory processing issues. Allow that quiet space, allow those earmuffs that I showed you right there, telling them ahead of time of change, so again, that predictability and that structure. And it might be that when you have a child that is struggling with sensory processing issues, that you keep them away from windows, you keep them away from doors, you keep them away from, some of your lighting might have a buzzing sound. And it's that buzzing sound that's causing the meltdown, all right? So be aware of that right there. And allow them to exercise. Y'all know the best exercise for the brain is exercise, all right? The best exercise for the brain is exercise. So we want to do that right there. So I wanted, last thing I wanted to go over with y'all again is just kind of the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. So when you have a child that has constant tantrums, especially due to their special need, all right, you know, sometimes, I told y'all earlier that when you get triggered, you're always the last person to know. So sometimes, even as adults, any of y'all in here today with your co-teacher? So your co-teacher's in the room with you, yeah. Y'all come up with a signal, all right? You know, hey, Aea, anytime I do like this, all right? That's because your body is telling me that you're about to lose your composure. So I'm here to help you. So if I tap my elbow, that means that I see you're about to lose your composure, all right? Because she doesn't see it yet, all right? And she's going to be the last person to see it. And we can do this with the child too, all right? So anytime you see me grab my elbow like that, that is my discreet way of telling you, let's stop, take a deep breath and relax. Because we don't want to call attention on the child. We don't want to put a spotlight on them. All right? Find that calming space in your classroom so that they can have a safe place for them to calm. Think about the factor that's causing the behavior. Remember the hitting and the scratching and the kicking and the biting. Those are nothing but physical actions. To help this child, you've got to find the factor that's causing the behavior. Set those clear expectations of what you're wanting. Sometimes when a child is throwing a tantrum, the best thing to do is to ignore it. Make sure they're safe, all right, but ignore it. I had a child one time, this has been a while ago. I was in the classroom, child started throwing a tantrum, right there next to me, flopping around. So I just got up and I walked over to the other side of the room. The kid stops his tantrum, stands up, walks across the room, lays back down next to me and continues with the tantrum. That made it very obvious that the child was seeking attention. Okay? Probably at home or somewhere else, that's how he got attention, was throwing that tantrum. And we're all seeking attention. And especially if you're not getting any positive attention, negative attention is better than no attention at all. So pretty obvious right there. And then praise the behavior that you want to see. Oh, what happened? Now with meltdowns, this is again when your kids with special needs, they're not getting the support that they needed and their body has just gone, oh, So get to know your child's triggers. Now as adults, we can probably make a list right now and be able to list out our triggers. For our children, they can't do that. So we're going to help them get to know their triggers. When you have that child that is attached to a materialistic object, you know that when another child comes near this, that's their trigger. All right? We're going to talk to them about that. Notice when it's escalating, and when you see that child escalating, distract and engage. Distract and engage them in something else. All right, and you do it in a very discreet manner that's not going to cause attention to the meltdown. All right, but you distract and engage. During a meltdown, your job is just to make sure that child is safe. Make sure that the other children are safe. So you're going to do an assessment of the situation, and basically all you're going to say to the child is, you are safe. My job is to keep you safe. Breathe. You've got this. All right? No lecturing, no talking, no teaching. All right? Because when they're in their survival state, no learning can take place. Give them some space. All right? Breathe. And it might be that you just sit there and send well wishes to that child. And you breathe with them. I actually have a video. Oh, I should have thrown it into this presentation. I have a video of a lady named Velda, and she is a pre-K teacher somewhere in another state. And there's a wonderful, wonderful video of a child having a meltdown. And all she does is she sits down next to the child and she breathes and sends him well wishes. And the video is about a minute long, but you can literally see the child calm. She doesn't say anything to him. She doesn't lecture him. She doesn't judge him. She just sits down next to him and she breathes and sends well wishes. And it's a really, really cool video. I'm going to have to find it and post it for y'all. All right? And then consider your meltdown plan. What are you going to do after the meltdown? So you're formulating your plan for the recovery. All right? Now remember, when a child goes into their survival state or into their emotional state, it takes the brain about 15 to 20 minutes to get back to the executive state. It doesn't happen automatically. So you want to allow time for the recovery of the meltdown. You need that time too. All right? You need that time as well. And then you find the right time to talk. And that's going to be helpful for you. All right. These are just some pictures that I threw in here. Last thing I got to say, we talked a lot about modifications and things that you can do for these kiddos. Any modification that you do is, you don't want them to feel shamed or indifferent. We want all of our children to feel included. We want all of our children to feel equal, all right? And so when you're supporting these kids, that's what you're gonna do. All right? Any questions or comments from Zoom or from Facebook or people that are in person? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have 3 questions. You said now that a child is sitting by your feet just to have attention. How can you deal with this child that needs attention all the time, just doing any sound or doing anything just to get attention?
Good question. So a child that is throwing a tantrum just to get attention, what can we do? Well, first off, we need to get that child to seek out positive attention instead of negative attention. So that child's going to need a lot of praise and encouragement on the things that they're doing right, and less attention on things that they're doing wrong or the expectations that they're not meeting. So you're going to really, really practice with that encouragement and that noticing of desired behavior. All right? I had a child one time, a 3-year-old child in our program, that mom was incarcerated. Dad was a single father with 2 kids. He was kind of a rough hillbilly type, old school, and we had a lot of challenges with this family. I mean, obviously there was a lot of unresolved trauma that was going on with every member of this family. Dad, 2 boys, everything. When Dad would come in the afternoon, he would immediately go up to the teacher and how was my kid's day today? And when the teacher would go, well, he had a difficult time today, then Dad would go to the little boy and, what did I tell you? You need to make sure you listen to your teacher. Do you want a whooping when you get home? And I started noticing that, when Dad came in and asked the teacher, how was my kid's day? And the teacher was like, well, we had a rough day. He hit 3 kids on the playground. Then Dad would to this kid, and the kid would literally smile. Okay? Now, when Dad would come in and go to the teacher and say, how was my child's day? Well, we had a really good day today. Don't you lie to me, teacher. Tell me, how was it? No, we actually had a really good day today. Then Dad would go over to the kid, grab him by the hand, and would not say a single word to the child, But I started noticing that when Dad would come in, say the kid was over here playing in the block center, the moment Dad came into the classroom and walked to the teacher, the child would literally stop playing and watch the interaction between the father and the teacher. And the moment the teacher gave a bad report, his little face would light up, because he knew he was about to get Dad's attention. When he had a good day and there was nothing to report, there was no attention. It was unbelievable. I pulled Dad aside and I said, well, hey, let's try something new. And let's go 1 week, and instead of focusing on all the negative behavior, let's spend a week focusing on the positive behavior and the things that your child did right. And let's make a really, really big deal about the good choices that he made and the safe choices that he made. And let's see how this goes for a week, because we want to get that child to focus on the positive attention and not the negative. But if there's no positive attention being given, like I said earlier, all right, at least negative attention is attention. It's better than nothing. Dad wasn't too happy with our conversation. Are you trying to tell me how to be a parent? Well, actually, yes, we are. But yeah, I don't know what happened to that family. They eventually went away, and we didn't ever see them again. But I wish them well, because they need a lot. They need a lot of well wishes. All right, very good. So. For those of you that have done this before, you are familiar. So, those of you in Facebook, the link for y'all to complete your online worksheet should already be on Facebook, because I had it scheduled to automatically post at 11:30. For those of you that are in Zoom, I'm posting it right now, or at least I think I'm posting it right now. Those of you that are in class, you've got it in your folder. So if y'all want to pull out your worksheet, and the certificate is on the back of it for those of you that are in class. I hope this information was helpful to y'all today. I hope that you learned some valuable pieces of information. It went super fast for me. I don't know about y'all, but it went super fast. So those of you on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us today. Your online worksheet links should be posted on my wall, so go to that wall. Zoom, give me just a minute and I'll get y'all pasted. So thanks a lot everyone for coming today.